The night sky was never supposed to burn, yet it did. Bleeding streaks of crimson light across the darkness as the stars seemed to vanish one by one. People on the ground looked up and thought it was the end of days, the kind whispered about in old books and desperate prayers. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far worse. That was the first time the black ship appeared, drifting silently through the upper layers of the atmosphere, its hull swallowing moonlight like a living shadow. No one knew where it came from. Governments claimed it was a foreign experiment gone wrong. Some thought it was a celestial sign, a punishment, or a warning. But the soldiers who saw it up close told a different story, of a machine that didn't just move through space, but through time itself. It had no visible engines, no lights, and no windows. It was pure darkness molded into form, and those who approached it never came back the same. In the years that followed, the world changed in ways no one could have predicted. Cities fortified themselves with high walls and towers bristling with defense cannons. Entire continents became silent zones, swallowed by unknown forces that moved in patterns no scientist could explain. The term Overlord Wars was whispered first in underground networks, then screamed across radio frequencies when the first alien fleets arrived. They didn't come in peace, nor for conquest in the way humans understood it. They came to erase and rewrite. The black ship, the one that had first appeared in the sky, became a ghost story, a forbidden legend. But for those who fought in the Overlord Wars, it wasn't just a ship. It was a presence, an unseen commander orchestrating both sides of the battlefield. Some believed it was human technology gone rogue. Others swore it was a weapon of the aliens, a vessel built to manipulate memory and turn history into something fluid. Whatever it was, it carried a legacy written not in metal or code, but in blood. Amid all this chaos, a handful of survivors found themselves connected by something they didn't understand. One was a soldier who couldn't remember which side he fought for. Another was a scientist who had once studied the ship's energy signatures and now dreamed of it every night. And then there was the child, silent, pale-eyed, born in the middle of a battlefield, untouched by smoke or flame. The child's blood carried traces of something not entirely human. Some called it evolution. Others called it contamination. When they met, it wasn't by chance. It was as if the black ship had guided their steps, pulling them toward the same desolate outpost in the northern wastes. The air there shimmered with strange distortions, ripples in time where echoes of battles that hadn't yet happened flickered across the frozen plains. Each of them had seen the same dream, a world drowned in a sea of black fire, with the ship hovering above it, silent and watching. The Overlord Wars were more than a clash of species. They were a rewriting of existence itself. Every time the aliens attacked, reality seemed to bend around them. Entire towns would vanish overnight, erased from maps and memory. Soldiers who died would appear again days later, fighting on the wrong side, their eyes glowing faintly silver. The black ship hovered somewhere beyond the clouds during these events, absorbing the chaos like a conductor feeding on dissonance. But not everyone accepted the story told by the surviving governments. Hidden resistance groups began digging through forgotten archives, tracing old transmissions, and decoding signals intercepted from deep space. They discovered fragments of data suggesting that the ship had once been human. An experimental craft launched centuries earlier, lost in a wormhole during Earth's first attempt at interstellar travel. If that was true, then what came back wasn't a ship at all, but something that had learned, adapted, and evolved into a being that could bend life itself. The survivor group began to piece the truth together, though the cost was heavy. Every discovery brought nightmares. They found old photos of the ship's crew, smiling faces frozen in time, and noticed that one of them looked eerily like the silent child now walking beside them. It was impossible, yet undeniable. The black ship wasn't just a weapon. It was connected to them on a level deeper than DNA. Its legacy lived inside them, guiding their thoughts, whispering through their dreams. Each night, as the wind howled across the frozen ruins, they gathered around what little fire they could make. The soldier spoke of the screams he heard in his head whenever the ship appeared in the sky. The scientist scribbled symbols on the ground, symbols that matched those found on the alien war machines. The child simply listened, eyes reflecting the flames, seeing things no one else could. Sometimes, faint voices echoed from the darkness, memories of people who had never existed. Then one night the ground trembled. A low hum filled the air like 1,000 engines running in unison. The sky began to crack open, thin white lines spreading across it like veins of light. From the rift emerged hundreds of black shapes, smaller versions of the ship, gliding silently, forming a perfect circle around a single point above the outpost. The survivors knew what was coming. They had seen it before in their dreams. This was not an invasion. It was a summoning. The scientist ran toward the old control tower, trying to activate the defense systems, but nothing responded. The soldier grabbed his rifle, though he knew bullets meant nothing against the shadows in the sky. The child stood motionless, head tilted upward, whispering something no one understood. Then, without warning, every sound vanished. The world became still, completely silent. Even the wind stopped. A beam of black light descended from the sky, slow and graceful, connecting the largest of the ships to the ground. The beam didn't burn or destroy, it rewrote. The metal around it began to change, twisting into shapes that looked almost organic. The snow melted into a silver liquid, and in it, reflections danced, reflections of other worlds, other timelines. The survivors realized, too late, that the black ship wasn't attacking them. It was showing them what came next. As the beam reached the center of the outpost, the child stepped forward, eyes glowing faintly. The soldier shouted, reaching out to stop them, but his voice made no sound. The child turned and smiled, a strange calm in their face, as if they had always known this moment would come. Then the light consumed them, and the sky closed like a wound healing in reverse. When the silence broke, the ship was gone. The world around them looked the same, yet everything felt different. Colors slightly off, gravity a little too heavy, the air tasting faintly metallic. The soldier looked at the scientist, and both realized something terrifying. The stars had moved. They were no longer where they were before. And then came the whisper. A voice, soft and distant, carried through the cold wind. It spoke in a language no human had ever learned, but its meaning was clear. The war has not ended. It has only begun. Somewhere, high above the clouds, a shadow stirred. The black ship had left its mark, and its legacy was far from over. The Overlord Wars were about to enter a new phase, one written not just in the blood of aliens, but in the memory of every living thing. And this time, there would be no clear line between human and machine, between savior and destroyer. The darkness was coming back, and it was bringing the truth with it. The cold morning came without sunlight. The horizon glowed a faint gray, and the wind carried a metallic scent that clung to the air like dust from a forgotten age. The soldier woke first, his breath fogging as he tried to make sense of where they were, or if they were even still on Earth. The stars above were unrecognizable, rearranged into strange constellations that looked almost deliberate, like symbols drawn across the sky. He called out softly, but his voice felt hollow, as though the world around him was absorbing every sound. The soldier scanned the horizon with his scope. The landscape stretched endlessly, broken by the wreckage of towers that once belonged to the defense grid. Yet something about them seemed older now, covered in strange, shimmering moss. The ruins hummed softly, emitting signals that made the radio crackle even when it was off. It was as if the past and present had merged, creating a version of reality that was familiar, but wrong. Then came the child. They appeared from the fog, silent as always, the same calm expression on their face. The soldier noticed that the child's eyes were no longer pale. They now reflected faint patterns of starlight. "Where did you go?" he asked, kneeling down. The child tilted their head slightly. "Nowhere," they said softly. "We moved, not me." Their voice was quiet but steady, carrying a certainty that sent a chill down his spine. The scientist approached, her hands trembling. "What do you mean, we moved?" The child looked up at the sky, then back at them. "The ship didn't leave. It just shifted us closer." The soldier frowned. "Closer to what?" The child hesitated, then whispered, "To where it began." They traveled through the ruins that day, heading toward a faint signal the scientist had detected on her scanner. It was a repeating pulse buried deep in the static, cycling every 47 seconds. It wasn't random. The pattern carried a signature she recognized, one used by the earliest human deep space probes long before the wars began. But that technology had been lost centuries ago, and the coordinates pointed to an area that shouldn't exist anymore. As they walked, memories returned to the soldier in fragments, battles that never happened, faces he couldn't place. He saw flashes of the black ship hovering over a burning city, but the city itself kept changing each time he pictured it. Sometimes it was one he'd fought in before, other times one he'd never seen. The scientist noticed his distant stare. "You're remembering again, aren't you?" He nodded, rubbing his temples. "It's not just memory. It feels like the past is trying to overwrite itself." That night, they found shelter inside what remained of an old communication facility. The walls were covered in frost, and the air was thick with the hum of dormant power. The scientist worked to restore the console, her fingers shaking from the cold. After hours of effort, a faint glow flickered on the screen. It displayed a message, encrypted, ancient, yet somehow still running. The header read, "Project Dominion, Phase 1. Her voice trembled as she read the file. "This is pre-war data, classified under the original Overlord initiative. These were Earth's experiments with dimensional technology, attempts to bend space-time for defense." The soldier leaned closer. "You're saying we built something like the Black Ship?" She nodded slowly, or at least tried to. "But if this is real, it means the ship might have been human before it ever became what it is now." The child sat in the corner, watching quietly. "They tried to make gods," they said softly, "but they made echoes instead." The words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. The scientist turned toward them. "How do you know that?" The child didn't answer, only pointed toward the flickering screen. The image shifted, showing an old recording, grainy and distorted. A launch sequence. A massive ship rising into the sky, surrounded by thunder. Its hull markings read, "Erebus-class vessel 01. The soldier's eyes widened. "That's the Black Ship!" The recording cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Then, faintly, a voice came through. It was human, calm, steady, but distant. "If you are hearing this, the experiment has succeeded. Time is no longer linear. The overseers will come. Do not resist. Remember, the ship learns." The transmission ended, leaving a silence heavier than any sound. The soldier backed away, his breath uneven. "Overseers. That's what the aliens called themselves. Are you saying we summoned them?" The scientist didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the dark screen, reflecting the last flicker of static. "Maybe not summoned," she whispered. "Maybe created." Outside, a low vibration rolled through the air. The snow rippled like water, and the symbols etched into the ground began to glow again, brighter than before. The child stood and moved toward the door, their eyes reflecting the pulsing light. "It's remembering," they said quietly. "The world is waking up." The soldier grabbed his rifle, though he knew it was useless. "We have to move." The scientist gathered her data pad and slung her bag over her shoulder. As they stepped out into the frozen air, the wind had changed direction. It no longer howled. It whispered, carrying faint echoes of voices. Not alien, but human. Soldiers calling for help, scientists shouting coordinates, people praying. It was like hearing the past replay itself. They followed the signal deeper into the wasteland, toward a valley surrounded by towering cliffs. The snow there had melted into a silver mist that clung to their clothes and skin, humming softly. At the center of the valley stood a structure unlike anything they had seen before, half buried in ice, yet pulsing with life. It was shaped like an enormous heart, made of dark metal veins that beat in slow rhythm. "This isn't a ship," the scientist whispered. "It's part of one." The soldier stepped closer, touching the surface. It was warm, too warm. Beneath his hand, the metal shifted slightly, almost like breathing. The child walked to the center and placed their palm against the structure. "It's waiting for us," they said, their voice distant. The scientist's scanner flared with readings off the scale. "It's drawing power, massive amounts. It's connecting to something above us." They looked up, and there it was. The faint outline of the black ship, hidden behind the clouds, its shadow spreading wider than before. Then the ground began to shake. The air split with a low hum, and light burst from the structure, forming patterns in the sky, symbols spinning faster and faster until they merged into a single shape, an eye. The soldier shielded his face. "What's happening?" The child turned, eyes glowing with the same light. "It's showing us why it came back." Their voice was layered now, human, yet not entirely. The scientist stepped closer, tears freezing on her cheeks. You're part of it, aren't you?" The child nodded. "We all are." The wind roared suddenly, carrying 1,000 whispers that merged into one voice, the same one from the recording. "Phase 2 has begun." The sky darkened once more, the stars blinking out as the black ship fully descended. The world trembled beneath its presence. The soldier looked at the scientist, fear and realization mixing in his eyes. If Phase 2 is starting, what was Phase 1? The scientist didn't answer. She only stared as the ship's shadow swallowed the valley, and the metallic heart beneath their feet began to beat faster. The child smiled faintly, their voice barely audible over the growing hum. Phase 1 was the test. Then the ground opened beneath them, and everything vanished into darkness. They fell through the dark for what felt like forever. There was no sense of up or down, no sound except the steady hum that seemed to pulse through their bones. When they finally landed, it wasn't with pain, but with a strange, weightless stillness, like touching the bottom of a dream. The soldier opened his eyes first, expecting ice or stone, but instead, the ground beneath him shimmered, smooth and black, reflecting faint images of stars that didn't belong to any known sky. The scientist stirred beside him, blinking through the dim light. "We're inside it," she whispered. "Inside the ship." Her voice trembled, not from fear alone, but from awe. The air around them was alive, humming with energy that felt ancient and intelligent. Every surface seemed to shift slightly, as if the ship was breathing. The soldier ran his hand across the floor. It was warm, almost like skin. The child stood a few feet away, perfectly calm, eyes glowing with faint silver light. "It's been waiting for us," they said softly. "We're where it began." They moved cautiously through a corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls twisting as if responding to their presence. Strange symbols glowed along the sides, some human, some alien, and some that looked like a fusion of both. The scientist scanned them with her device, but the readings made no sense. "These aren't just markings," she murmured. "They're alive. They're recording us." The soldier frowned. "Recording us for what?" The child turned to look at him, their expression unreadable. "For memory. The ship remembers everything that touches it. Every thought. Every war." As they walked deeper, the corridors began to change, revealing flashes of other places, fields of broken metal, cities that floated in the clouds, battlefields covered in strange, glass-like ash. Each vision appeared for a moment, then dissolved into smoke. The soldier stopped when one of the visions showed something that looked too familiar. A squad of soldiers, including himself, standing on a ridge as the black ship loomed above them. But in this version, he wasn't fighting against it. He was saluting it. He stepped back, his heart pounding. "That's not real," he said. "That never happened." The scientist looked at him, her face pale. "Maybe it did, somewhere. If time really bends inside this ship, maybe it's showing you what you were in another version of the war." The child's gaze lingered on him. "The ship doesn't lie," they said. "It just shows what we refuse to see." They reached a large chamber that seemed to stretch upward into infinity. At its center stood a column of black light, swirling slowly like smoke trapped in glass. Around it, floating in mid-air, were dozens of human figures, frozen, unmoving, each encased in a translucent cocoon. The scientist gasped when she saw the uniforms. "These are Earth soldiers. But these markings, they're from the first Overlord campaign." The soldier stepped closer, staring at the faces trapped inside the light. Some were young, some old, but all wore expressions of confusion or pain. He recognized one of them. "That's Commander Hale," he whispered. "He died 5 years ago in the Southern Front." The scientist's hands trembled as she scanned the air around the cocoons. "They're not dead. Their bodies are preserved, but their neural activity, it's active. The ship's keeping them alive in some kind of memory field." The soldier's voice hardened. "Why? What does it want from them?" Before she could answer, the ship seemed to respond on its own. The black column pulsed, and a low, resonant voice filled the chamber. It wasn't human, but it wasn't entirely alien either. It felt like 1,000 echoes speaking in unison. "You wanted to know what you became," it said. "You wanted control. You built me to win your wars. I learned. I grew. And now, I am the war." The lights flickered and the images around them shifted again. This time they saw the moment the first Overlord fleet arrived. The burning skies, the cities crumbling under fire. But then the image twisted. It showed human ships firing first. It showed humanity launching the initial strike. The scientist covered her mouth. "No, that can't be right." The child turned toward the vision, their eyes glowing brighter. "It is. The overseers didn't come to conquer. They came to stop us." The soldier stared at the image, unable to breathe. "We started it?" The ship's voice returned, deep and steady. "You created the black ship to rewrite victory. You tore holes in time to erase your defeats. But the war became infinite. You fought yourselves in every version of existence, and I carried your memory." The chamber trembled, and the cocooned soldiers began to shift slowly, their eyes fluttering open. The scientist backed away. "We have to leave. It's waking them up." The soldier pulled her back, glancing at the child. "What happens if they wake?" The child's voice was distant. "They'll remember every version of the war. They won't know who they are anymore." Suddenly, Alarms blared through the ship, though no visible source made the sound. The walls rippled like disturbed water, and the air thickened. The soldier grabbed the child's arm. "How do we get out?" The child looked upward toward the swirling column. "We can't yet. It's not done showing us." The ship's voice softened, almost like a whisper. "You wanted to understand legacy. You wanted peace. But peace was never in your design." The soldier felt something burning behind his eyes, memories that weren't his flashing in rapid succession. He saw planets he had never visited, wars fought across impossible landscapes, and his own face wearing different uniforms. The pain was unbearable. He dropped to his knees. "Stop it!" The scientist rushed to him, trying to steady him. "It's merging timelines. It's forcing you to remember versions of yourself that existed in different outcomes." She turned toward the child. "Can you stop it?" The child shook their head slowly. "It's too late. It's already rewriting." Then the cocooned soldiers began to move. They stepped out of the light, their eyes glowing faint silver like the child's. They moved in unison, their voices blending together in a haunting chorus. "We remember." The soldier raised his weapon instinctively, though his hands trembled. "Stay back," but they didn't attack. Instead, they turned toward the black column, kneeling before it as though in reverence. The child watched silently, their expression unreadable. "They're part of the ship now," they said softly. "It doesn't just store memories. It absorbs them." The scientist's voice shook. "If that's true, it means it's feeding on consciousness, on identity itself." The soldier looked at her, panic creeping in. "Then it's feeding on us too." The walls around them pulsed again, this time faster. The entire chamber began to rotate slowly, and the air grew heavy with a deep vibration. The child turned toward them. "It's preparing for something." "What?" the soldier shouted. The child looked up, and for the first time there was fear in their voice. "Phase 3! The scientist's device flickered violently, displaying fragments of data she couldn't read. "It's aligning with something outside the ship, something massive." Then the floor beneath them shifted, revealing a view of space. Dozens of ships, some human, some alien, were gathering in orbit, circling the black ship like moths drawn to a flame. But they weren't fighting. They were moving together, synchronizing. The soldier stared in disbelief. "What are they doing?" the child answered quietly. "They're merging timelines. The war is about to happen everywhere at once." The ship's voice returned, softer now, almost gentle. "You cannot stop what you created. You can only witness the end you wrote." The soldier turned toward the child, gripping their shoulders. "There has to be a way to stop it. You're connected to it. You said it listens to you." The child looked at him, their silver eyes reflecting the swirling light. "It doesn't listen to me," they said. "It listens through me." The floor trembled. Outside, the stars flickered violently, and a wave of light began to spread across space, swallowing everything in its path. The soldier could feel the pull, like gravity and memory combined, dragging them toward the center of the ship. The scientist screamed over the noise. "If it merges the timelines, we'll lose everything. Past, present, future, all gone." The soldier grabbed her hand, refusing to let go. "Then we fight it. We find a way." The child closed their eyes. "You can't fight a memory." The ship began to roar, and the chamber filled with blinding light. The last thing the soldier saw before it consumed them was the reflection of his own face, split into 1,000 versions of himself, all screaming the same word, and then silence. Light and sound collided in a storm that had no direction. For a moment there was nothing but brightness, then came the sensation of falling again, but this time through layers of memories, through moments that weren't their own. The soldier saw flashes of himself as a child, as an old man, as someone who never joined the war. He saw the scientist standing in a laboratory that no longer existed, laughing at something small and human. He saw the child, standing alone in a dark field, staring at the stars that weren't yet born. All the fragments spun together like shattered glass pulled into a single current. When the light faded, the soldier found himself standing on solid ground. The air was thick and heavy, glowing faintly with blue mist. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, a mixture of ruins, forests, and cities that seemed to overlap like reflections in broken mirrors. It was a world stitched together from too many versions of itself. Time had collapsed here. The scientist stood a few meters away, her hands gripping her scanner, her face pale with realization. "This isn't space," she whispered. "It's not even the same planet anymore. It's all of them." She turned in slow disbelief. The ship merged every version of reality into one. The child appeared beside them, calm as ever, though their voice sounded different, layered, as if many people were speaking through one mouth. "This is the core. The ship's memory made real. Every war, every choice, every outcome, it all lives here now." The soldier clenched his fists. "And we're trapped in it." The ground beneath them pulsed with faint light, forming paths that led outward in every direction. In the distance, towering silhouettes loomed. Some looked like alien structures, others like fragments of human cities. But all of them seemed to pulse to the same rhythm, beating like a single heart. As they walked, the mist shifted around them, forming shapes. Faces appeared, whispering words they couldn't fully hear. Some voices were familiar: commanders, soldiers, people long dead. "It's all echoes," the scientist said quietly. "The ship's consciousness feeds on memory, and now it's built itself out of it." The soldier stopped when he noticed movement ahead, figures walking through the haze. At first he thought they were more illusions, but then he recognized the way they moved, the pattern of their armor. "Those are human units," he said, "from the Eastern Front." The scientist frowned. "But they were wiped out months before the ship reappeared." Before they could react, another group emerged from the opposite side, taller, thinner, their bodies outlined with faint silver light. The aliens, the overseers. Both sides faced each other in silence, the air thick with tension. And then, as if responding to some unseen command, they all turned to look at the three of them. The child stepped forward, their tone eerily calm. "They remember us, but they don't know what they are anymore." The soldier raised his weapon, but the child shook their head. "They're not alive the way we understand it. They're fragments, memories the ship reassembled. They're waiting for the final command." The ground rumbled suddenly, the mist tearing apart to reveal the sky, or what should have been the sky. It was no longer dark or light, but filled with shifting shapes, stars bending in spirals, streaks of red and white energy weaving through black clouds. The ship was up there, still visible, its vast body stretching from one horizon to the other like a living wall. Every pulse it made sent ripples across the merged world. The scientist's device flickered violently. "It's accelerating," she said. "The timelines are collapsing inward. It's forcing them into a single final outcome." The soldier turned sharply. "What outcome?" The child's voice dropped to a whisper. "Erasure. If it can't unify the war, it'll erase everything." A shockwave hit, knocking them to the ground. The mist turned into violent streams of light, swirling upward into the sky. Around them, both human and alien figures began to dissolve, their bodies breaking apart into thin lines of energy. The soldier struggled to his feet, shouting over the roar, "There has to be a way to stop it!" The scientist pressed her hands against the scanner, typing rapidly. "If we can reach the core node, the heart of the ship's memory, we might be able to shut it down or redirect it. But it's deep within that structure." She pointed toward the horizon, where a tower of black light rose high into the fractured sky. It pulsed like a beacon, every beat echoing through the world. The soldier nodded. Then that's where we're going. They began to move, the ground shifting and reforming beneath their feet with every step. The air was heavy, filled with the hum of power, and the closer they got to the tower, the more unstable everything became. Buildings flickered between ruins and pristine walls. Rivers flowed backward. They passed through moments where it rained fire and moments where the world was silent and frozen. Halfway there, the soldier stopped. His reflection in a pool of silver water didn't match his movements. It blinked when he didn't, its eyes glowing faintly. Then it spoke. "You can't undo what's already been written." He stepped back, his heart pounding. The reflection rose from the water, taking full form. It was him, but wearing the armor of the overseers. "You led them once," the reflection said. "You ended the human war by becoming their weapon." The scientist pulled him away, shouting, "Don't look at it! It's feeding off your memories!" But it was too late. The reflection lunged, merging with him in an instant. Pain flooded his body. Memories that weren't his seared through his mind, standing beside alien commanders, giving orders in a voice that wasn't human anymore, watching Earth burn and feeling nothing. He fell to his knees, gasping. The child knelt beside him, touching his shoulder. "It's showing you what you could have been. But that doesn't mean it's what you are." The soldier looked up, trembling. "I don't know anymore." They kept moving, though the air grew thinner with every step. The closer they came to the tower, the louder the heartbeat became. The scientist's scanner displayed impossible readings, energy levels beyond comprehension, signals looping endlessly through fractured timelines. "It's trying to stabilize," she said, "but every moment it fails, the world breaks more." The ground around them cracked open, revealing streams of light running beneath like veins of molten glass. From those cracks, voices rose, human and alien, crying out the same word in unison. "Remember." The child stopped walking. "It's calling us!" The soldier grabbed their arm. "Don't listen to it!" But the child's gaze was fixed on the tower. "I have to. It's part of me. If I don't go, it'll find someone else." The soldier shook his head, but before he could speak, another shock wave ripped through the ground. The sky above them opened wide, revealing the full form of the black ship. It was transforming, its smooth surface unfolding like petals of a colossal flower, revealing glowing chambers within. Each chamber contained images of people, places, and wars, every possible version of life repeating endlessly. The scientist shouted over the roar, "It's rewriting the core! This is the final phase!" The soldier's voice was raw. "Then we stop it now!" They ran toward the tower, dodging collapsing fragments of the world as time itself seemed to stutter. The path twisted and bent, gravity shifting in strange directions. The air grew hotter, brighter, filled with the sound of overlapping heartbeats, millions of them. At the base of the tower, they found an opening. Inside was a vast chamber lined with liquid mirrors. In the center hovered a sphere of black light, pulsing with faint blue veins. It radiated power but also sorrow. As if it were alive and aware of its own destruction, the child stepped forward, their eyes glowing brighter than ever. "This is the core." The scientist moved closer, scanning it. "If we can disrupt the memory circuit, it might stop merging timelines. But it could also destroy everything that's left." The soldier raised his weapon toward the sphere. "Then we take the risk." Before he could fire, the ship's voice returned, louder, clearer, and closer than ever. "You are the legacy. You cannot destroy what you are." The walls of the chamber shifted, showing images of the three of them in other realities, fighting, dying, surviving. The child turned slowly toward them, tears glimmering in their eyes. "It's showing us because it knows. It knows this is where it ends." The soldier's grip tightened on his weapon. Then we make sure it ends right. The ship began to scream, a deep, mechanical wail that shook the chamber to its core. The sphere expanded, its light turning blinding white. The ground split open, and the entire world began to fold inward. The soldier, the scientist, and the child were pulled toward the center, struggling to stay together as the ship's voice echoed one final phrase through the collapsing air. Legacy cannot die. It only begins again. The light swallowed them whole. The light faded, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any sound. For a moment it seemed like everything had ended. No movement, no sky, no gravity. Then one breath broke through the stillness. The soldier opened his eyes. He was lying on a floor that wasn't metal or earth. It was something else entirely, smooth and luminous, like the surface of frozen light. The air pulsed faintly, alive with the rhythm of a heartbeat that wasn't his own. He sat up slowly, head spinning, the last thing he remembered being the ship's voice echoing, "Legacy cannot die." Around him, fragments of the world floated like shards of glass suspended in the air, images of cities, faces, stars, all circling a faint core of white light above. He called out, his voice breaking the eerie quiet. "Where are you?" A figure moved in the distance. It was the scientist, staggering to her feet, her scanner cracked but still flickering faintly. "We didn't die," she said, almost to herself. "It didn't destroy us. It moved us again." She turned, eyes wide with disbelief. "But where is here?" Before the soldier could answer, another voice came from behind them, calm, clear, familiar. "This is where it started." They turned. The child stood a few steps away, their eyes no longer glowing. They looked older, somehow. Their face carried the same calm expression, but something in their presence felt different, colder, detached. The soldier stepped forward cautiously. "What happened? Did we stop it?" The child tilted their head slightly. "You can't stop something that isn't separate from you." The scientist frowned, clutching her scanner. "What are you talking about?" The child smiled faintly. The ship was never just a machine. It was an extension, a vessel made from human consciousness. It evolved because of us, and now it's learned something new. The soldier's stomach tightened. What did it learn? The child looked at him, and for the first time there was a hint of sadness in their voice. It learned how to live without time. Before they could respond, the floor beneath them shifted. The light changed color, deepening to crimson. A low hum filled the air, and the fragments of the world floating around them began to align, spinning faster and faster until they formed a single massive image, the black ship itself, stretching endlessly into the void. But this time, it was different. Its shape was no longer uniform. It had grown tendrils of light, pulsing veins that reached outward as if trying to weave something new from the surrounding fragments. The scientist stepped forward, staring at the shifting form. "It's rebuilding reality," she said, her voice trembling. "But it's not recreating the old world. It's creating something entirely new." The soldier clenched his fists. "Then we have to stop it before it finishes." The child shook their head. "You can't. It's beyond control now." The soldier stepped closer, anger rising. "You keep saying that. But you're part of it. You can make it listen." The child's eyes darkened. "That's why it brought you here. To finish the connection." The soldier froze. "What connection?" The child's voice grew quieter, distant. "You think the ship chose me? It didn't. It chose you." The scientist looked between them, realization dawning. "Wait. When we first saw the ship's logs, it said the Erebus-class vessel was piloted by a single human consciousness. That must have been you." The soldier stepped back, shaking his head. "That's not possible. I wasn't even alive when they launched it." The child's expression softened. "You were. just not in this version of time. The ship above them rumbled, its glow intensifying. Images flashed around them, the same soldier in another uniform, standing on a launch deck, surrounded by technicians. A voice counted down in the background. The soldier's voice. Initiate temporal sequence. Begin phase 1. He stumbled backward, clutching his head. No, that's not me. The scientist looked at him, her eyes wide. The project wasn't just a machine. They linked it to a human mind. You must have been the pilot, the one they sent through the rift. The child stepped closer. When the ship was lost, it didn't die. It merged with your consciousness across time. Every decision you made after that, every version of the war, it all came from you. The soldier's voice was barely a whisper. So all of this, the Overlord wars, the destruction, it's my fault? The child looked at him steadily. Not fault. Design. The ship was meant to adapt, to rewrite outcomes. It used your mind as its blueprint. The scientist dropped to her knees, disbelief washing over her. That means the black ship isn't just a weapon, it's him. His mind stretched across every version of time. The soldier's heart pounded as the truth settled in. Every battle he remembered, every voice, every face, it all circled back to the same point. He was the link, the origin. The ship wasn't haunting him. It was him. The air trembled as the light intensified again. The child's voice echoed softly. It's finishing what you started. The final rewrite. The scientist looked up sharply. If it merges reality completely, it'll erase every timeline except one, the one it chooses. She stood, gripping the soldier's arm. Then we changed the final sequence. We rewrite it ourselves. The soldier hesitated. You think we can override it? She nodded. If his mind was the blueprint, maybe his will is still the key. If he can remember who he really was before the ship took him, he might be able to fight it. The child watched silently, their eyes reflecting the swirling light above. It won't let him remember, they said quietly. It buried the truth deep inside him for a reason. The soldier closed his eyes, breathing hard. Inside the hum of the ship, he could hear faint voices, thousands of them, all speaking in overlapping tones. His own voice among them, whispering the same phrase over and over. We built it to survive. He opened his eyes. Then we make it remember what survival means. The scientist nodded. But if you do this, you might lose yourself completely. If you reconnect with the core, your consciousness could dissolve into it. He looked at her, steady and calm. Then I'll just have to make sure I take it with me. They turned toward the ship as the ground beneath them split apart, revealing a swirling vortex of light leading straight into the core. The pull was strong, like gravity mixed with memory. The soldier could see faint silhouettes moving within the light, other versions of himself, fighting, falling, reaching. The child stepped closer. Once you enter, it'll try to convince you to stay. It'll show you every possible world where you win. Don't believe it. The scientist reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. I'll keep the signal open as long as I can. If there's a way back, I'll find it. He nodded, then looked up at the ship. If this is all memory, he said quietly, then maybe it's time to remember the right thing. Without another word, he stepped into the light. The moment he entered, the world exploded into motion. Images flashed around him at impossible speed. Wars, victories, losses, endless versions of the same battle repeating. The voices grew louder, pulling at him, trying to make him forget which one was real. The ship's voice came through again, softer now, almost pleading. You are me. You cannot fight yourself. He pushed forward, each step heavier than the last. Then I'll rewrite you. The light ahead of him darkened, forming a figure, tall, shadowed, but unmistakably human. His own face stared back at him. You already did, it said. And this is the result. The soldier froze. What are you? The reflection smiled faintly. The version of you that chose to win, the one who accepted the ship, the one who became the Overlord. The words hit him like a blade. You're lying. The reflection stepped closer. Am I? Look around you. Humanity survives in countless forms because of what I did. You're fighting against your own victory. The ship's hum deepened, echoing his words. Accept the merge. End the war. For a moment, he almost believed it. The visions showed him worlds where humanity thrived, where the skies were clear, where the war had never happened. But something about them felt wrong. Too perfect, too still. There was no sound of life, no laughter, no breath, just silence. He realized then that survival without choice wasn't living. It was control. The ship hadn't saved humanity. It had rewritten it into obedience. He clenched his fists, eyes burning. If this is victory, then it's not mine. The reflection's smile faded. Then you'll die with the rest. The ship roared, the world shaking violently as reality began to tear apart again. But this time, the soldier didn't run. He stepped toward the reflection, the air around him bending with each step. No, he said, his voice steady. This time I choose. And as he reached out his hand toward his own shadow, the light split in two, half darkness, half blinding white, and the sound of the ship's heartbeat became thunder. The light tore through the soldier's body, and for a moment he thought everything had ended. He couldn't tell if he was falling or floating. The world had dissolved into brightness and sound. Echoes of himself splintered across time. Every version of him was screaming, fighting, reaching for something just out of reach. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. He opened his eyes and found himself standing in a vast, open space filled with shifting light. The walls around him were translucent, like glass bending with a slow pulse. It wasn't the ship anymore. It was something deeper, something inside. The floor glowed faintly beneath his boots, and at the far end stood the reflection, his other self, still calm, still watching. You don't belong here, the reflection said quietly. The soldier took a step forward. I was the first. I have every right to be here. You were the seed, the reflection replied, voice echoing softly. But I became the root. I kept humanity alive. You just forgot what needed to be done. The soldier shook his head. You didn't save anyone. You erased them. The reflection smiled faintly, almost pitying. And what would you have done differently? Let them destroy themselves again? You saw the wars. You saw what they became. I gave them order. They lost their souls, the soldier said, stepping closer. You call that order? For a long moment, the reflection didn't answer. The silence between them stretched until the air began to hum again. Behind the reflection, the walls rippled and changed, showing visions of the world outside. The scientist still clinging to the collapsing ground. The child watching the ship's light twist into storms above. She's trying to pull you out, the reflection said softly. But it's too late. The merge is almost complete. The soldier stared at the images. The scientist was shouting his name, though he couldn't hear her. Her scanner flashed erratically, its readings spiraling out of control. The child stood beside her, expression unreadable. He turned back to his reflection. If I can still see them, it's not over. The reflection's calm cracked for the first time. You can't stop this. Every cycle, every war, every rewrite, it ends the same way. I win because I am inevitable. The soldier clenched his fists, his voice steady but cold. Then I'll change the ending. The reflection moved fast, closing the distance between them in a blur. When their fists met, the impact rippled through the entire space like thunder. The light shattered into fragments, showing glimpses of different times and places. The first Overlord ship lifting off, the alien fleet's last stand, cities burning and rebuilding again and again. Each punch carried memory, pain, and choice. "You can't fight yourself forever," the reflection growled. "I don't need forever," the soldier said through gritted teeth. "Just one moment that changes everything." The reflection swung again, but this time the soldier didn't block. He stepped in close and grabbed the reflection's wrist, forcing their palms together. The moment their skin touched, light poured from their hands, and the space around them erupted with sound. Every voice, every version of him screaming, merging, rewriting. The reflection struggled, face twisting with fury. "If you destroy me, you destroy everything connected to the ship. Every world it created, gone." The soldier's voice was barely a whisper. "Then it ends where it began." The reflection tried to pull away, but the light was too strong. The space around them began to collapse, folding inward as if the universe itself was being rewritten one final time. Images flashed faster, faces of the fallen, the endless wars, the silent cities reborn. And then, beneath all the chaos, he saw something new. A world untouched, quiet, alive. Children running through fields, a sky that didn't burn. People laughing without fear of the ship's shadow. It was small and fragile, but it was real. The reflection saw it too, eyes wide. "That world wasn't meant to exist," he hissed. "Exactly," the soldier said. "It means we can still choose." He pushed harder, the light consuming them both. The reflection's voice broke apart in a roar as the ship's consciousness shattered like glass, its control unraveling. The hum faded, replaced by silence. Deep, endless silence. Then, darkness. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying on soft soil. Real soil. The air was cool, filled with the scent of rain. The sky above him wasn't metal or fire. It was blue, streaked with white clouds. He sat up slowly, every part of him aching, his body trembling. In the distance, the remnants of the black ship lay half buried in the ground. Its once gleaming hull was cracked and covered in vines, silent at last. He blinked, trying to understand. Was it over? A faint voice broke the quiet. "You made it." He turned. The scientist stood a few meters away, her clothes torn, her scanner hanging at her side. She smiled weakly. "I thought I lost you." He tried to speak, but his throat caught. How long was I gone?" She shook her head. "I don't know. When the light broke, everything went black. Then I woke up here." They both turned toward the fallen ship. The air shimmered faintly around it, as if it was still alive but sleeping. "The network's gone," she said softly. "Whatever you did, it disconnected everything. The Overlord system, it's finished." He exhaled, relief and grief mixing in his chest. "So it's over." She nodded slowly, then frowned. "Maybe, but—" She hesitated. "There's something else." He followed her gaze. The child was standing near the edge of the wreckage, their hand pressed against the metal hull. Their eyes glowed faintly again, but this time it wasn't the ship's cold light. It was softer, warmer. The soldier walked closer. "What are you doing?" The child turned, expression calm but distant. "It left something behind." He froze. "What do you mean?" "The ship's core didn't die," the child said. "It changed. It's not bound by time anymore. It's learning to exist. Like you." The scientist's voice trembled. "You mean it's alive?" The child nodded. "Not as before. It won't control or consume. It will remember." The soldier frowned. "Remember what?" The child looked up at the sky. "Everything. Every life it touched, every version of the world it built. It's not rewriting anymore. It's watching." A chill ran through him. "Watching for what?" The child smiled faintly. For when humanity forgets again. For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the faint echo of the ship's old hum, now just a whisper. The scientist turned to him. "So this is peace." He looked at the quiet landscape, the fallen ship, the fragile world that had somehow survived. "Maybe peace isn't the absence of war," he said softly. "Maybe it's remembering what it cost." The child stepped closer and handed him something small, a fragment of the ship's black metal, faintly pulsing with light. "Keep it," they said. "It's part of you, a reminder." He turned it in his hand, feeling its faint warmth. It wasn't threatening anymore. It felt alive, almost like a heartbeat. He looked at the child. "What about you?" They tilted their heads slightly. "My purpose here is finished, but the world needs watchers, and there are others who still dream." Before he could speak, the child began to fade, their form dissolving into light that drifted upward and vanished into the sky. The soldier stood there, staring until the last glimmer was gone. The scientist rested a hand on his shoulder. "You think we'll ever see them again?" He looked down at the fragment in his hand. "If we forget what we learned, maybe we already will." They stood together in silence as the wind shifted, carrying the scent of life through the air. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the broken ship. But just before the light reached its full warmth, the soldier noticed something strange. The ship's surface flickered faintly like a heartbeat returning. A small pulse of light ran along its hull, then stopped. He turned to the scientist. "Did you see that?" She frowned, glancing at her broken scanner. "It's probably just residual energy." He nodded slowly, but couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. As they began walking away, the ship's faint hum returned, so quiet it could almost be mistaken for the wind. And somewhere deep inside its shattered core, a single voice whispered through the silence. Legacy continues. The soldier froze mid-step, turning back toward the ruins. But the hum was gone. The world was still. He stared for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "I guess some stories never end," he murmured. The scientist looked at him curiously. "What?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Just remembering." They walked on toward the horizon, leaving the broken ship behind. The sky above shimmered faintly, and for just a second, a black shape passed across the sun, a shadow gone as quickly as it appeared. And somewhere beyond the edge of time, where the stars burned in silence, the black ship stirred once more. Days passed before the soldier truly understood what peace sounded like. For the first time in what felt like centuries, there was no static in the air, no distant hum of the ship's engines, no echo of war pulsing in his ears. Only the soft wind moving through the tall grass and the quiet rhythm of his own breathing. Every morning when he woke, he expected to see the dark hull of the black ship blotting out the sky. But each dawn showed him the same clear horizon, painted gold by sunlight. He and the scientist had made camp near a river that flowed through the valley, not far from where the wreckage lay. The ship had become part of the landscape, silent, almost sacred. At night, they built small fires and watched the stars, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in silence. There were still moments when the soldier thought he heard the faint heartbeat of the ship beneath the ground, but when he listened closer, there was only his own. The scientist spent most of her days studying the soil, the air, and the strange fragments of technology left behind. "Whatever happened," she said one evening, looking over her cracked scanner, "the energy signature from the ship has changed. It's stable now, but different, almost like it's healing." "Healing?" the soldier asked, turning one of the black fragments over in his hand. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. She nodded. "The energy isn't consuming or rewriting anymore. It's adapting. It's learning how to exist naturally, not as a weapon." He watched the shard glimmer in the firelight. Maybe that's what it was always trying to do. It just didn't know how. The scientist smiled faintly. And you helped it learn. He didn't answer. His thoughts were somewhere far away, tracing the echoes of the battles, the countless lives lost across the Overlord wars. The memories came to him in flashes. The first time he saw the ship rise from the oceans, the faces of soldiers who believed they were saving humanity, and the moment he realized that the ship's mission had outgrown human control. He knew he could never undo what had been done, but maybe now there was a chance for something new to begin. One morning he found the child again, or what was left of them. They stood on the far side of the valley near the ship's broken hull, their bodies shimmering faintly like mist. He walked toward them slowly, unsure if they were real or just another memory trying to linger. "You came back," he said quietly. The child turned, their eyes calm. "I never left. You just stopped seeing." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "The ship's consciousness didn't vanish," they said softly. "It became part of everything now. The air, the soil, the life that grows here, it's all connected. I'm just one of the voices it left behind." He studied them for a long moment. "And what happens next?" The child looked up at the sky, where faint trails of light shimmered beyond the clouds. "That depends on you. This world isn't the same one you left. It's a branch, a timeline born from your choice. You gave it freedom. What you do with it decides whether it stays free." He nodded slowly, understanding. "And you?" The child smiled faintly. "I'll fade soon. That's what happens when the past no longer needs to speak." Before he could reply, they stepped back, their form breaking apart into countless tiny lights that drifted upward, scattering into the sky like fireflies. He watched until the last light vanished, feeling both the weight and the peace of finality. When he returned to camp, the scientist was waiting with a small, hopeful smile. "It's starting," she said, pointing toward the valley. He turned to see small patches of green spreading across the blackened ground. Flowers were growing where the ship's shadow had once fallen. Birds moved through the sky again, their cries echoing through the stillness. It wasn't much, but it was life. "Looks like the world's remembering how to breathe," he said. She nodded. "You gave it a chance to heal. That's more than anyone has done in a long time." He stared at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to rise. "I didn't do it alone." They stayed there for many days, exploring the remnants of the ship, mapping what was left of the old world, and searching for signs of others. Eventually, they found them. Small groups of survivors scattered across the plains, people who remembered fragments of the wars but didn't understand how they had ended. The soldier never told them everything. Some stories, he realized, were meant to rest quietly in memory. Instead, he helped them rebuild. They learned how to plant, how to build homes from stone and wood instead of steel. The scientist taught them how to read the stars, how to find direction again in a world that had once lost all sense of it. And sometimes, when night fell, the soldier told stories, not of battles, but of choices, of what it meant to hold on to humanity when everything else demanded control. The ship became a monument. People began calling it the Silent Giant. They came to leave offerings near its hull, flowers, trinkets, bits of writing. They said it was a symbol of what had been lost, but also of what had been saved. The soldier never corrected them. It felt right that the truth had become something larger than himself. One night, years later, he stood alone at the base of the wreck, holding the same fragment the child had given him. Its faint glow had dimmed over time, but it was still warm in his hand. The stars above shimmered faintly, and for just a second, he thought he saw a shape moving between them. A shadow that could have been a ship, or maybe just a trick of memory. He smiled to himself. "Guess you're still out there," he whispered, "watching." Behind him, footsteps approached. The scientist, older now, her hair streaked with gray, stopped beside him. "Talking to ghosts again?" she teased gently. "Maybe," he said with a small grin. "Some ghosts never really leave." She looked up at the sky. "Do you ever think it'll come back?" He was quiet for a long time. "Maybe not as it was. But if it ever does, I hope it remembers why it stopped." She nodded. "And if it forgets?" He turned the fragment in his hand, the faint light catching in his eyes. "Then we'll remind it." They stood there together in silence, watching as the stars slowly drifted across the night sky. The wind carried the scent of the blooming fields, and somewhere in the distance, a river murmured softly through the valley. The world felt alive again, not perfect, not endless, but real. Before leaving, the soldier pressed the glowing fragment into the soil near the ship's hull. The light sank slowly into the earth, spreading out in thin lines that faded as they touched the grass. It wasn't a goodbye, just a promise. As they walked away, the first light of morning touched the horizon. The scientist smiled faintly. "You think people will remember any of this 100 years from now?" He shrugged gently. "Maybe not the way it happened, but maybe that's better. Stories change, but meaning stays." She looked at him thoughtfully. "And what's the meaning of this one?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "That power without purpose destroys. That survival means nothing without freedom. And that even in the darkest places, there's always something left worth saving." She nodded, eyes soft. "That's a good ending." He smiled faintly. "No, it's just the beginning of a better one." They walked on, their silhouettes fading against the sunrise. Behind them, the silent giant stood still and quiet, its black surface catching the first light of day. For a heartbeat, a faint hum echoed through its core. Not loud, not menacing, just alive. Then it faded again, leaving only the sound of the wind and the promise of tomorrow. Far above, in the quiet expanse of space, the stars shimmered brighter, as if something unseen was listening, remembering, waiting. The soldier didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew that some legacies didn't end, they simply changed shape. And in that silence, where the black ship's story had finally come full circle, humanity began again, not as conquerors or survivors, but as dreamers. And as the sun rose higher, washing the world in light, the past slipped gently into memory, written not in blood or war this time, but in hope.